Hello, and welcome to an HDRN Pragmatic Trials Training Program educational module. I'm Liam.
And I'm Angela. Today we're diving into the first of 3 modules on developing protocols for pragmatic clinical trials, guided by the SPIRIT checklist.
SPIRIT stands for Standard Protocol Items, Recommendations for Interventional Trials. This checklist lays out the key elements every clinical trial protocol should include. Following the SPIRIT guidelines ensures transparency, reproducibility, scientific and ethical rigor, and reduces the need for amendments and clarifications during trial conduct. The updated SPIRIT 2025 checklist expands to 34 items, reflecting the latest best practices.
In this module, we'll focus on the first 18 items from the SPIRIT checklist, including administrative information, open science practices including registration, data sharing, funding, and conflicts of interest, the introduction, and methods related to participants, interventions, and outcomes. Then, in the next 2 modules, we'll pick up with the remaining SPIRIT items.
Whether you're designing your first protocol or refining your 10th, this 3-part series will help you apply SPIRIT with a pragmatic lens.
Yeah, absolutely. You can think of the protocol as the why and what of the trial. It's the foundation for planning, conducting, oversight, and transparency. It's also what you submit to ethics boards and regulators to show you're meeting requirements and adhering to ethical standards. Okay, let's get started with the core elements that form the foundation of a pragmatic trial protocol.
First up, the title. SPIRIT Item 1A says the title should mention the trial design, the population, and the interventions, and indicate that it's a protocol. Putting pragmatic trial right in the title is a good idea, so readers know up front that the trial is embedded in a routine care setting. Along with the title, we need a structured summary, which is SPIRIT Item 1B. This is essentially an abstract of the protocol, and it should concisely summarize key elements. Having a well-structured summary helps busy audiences like healthcare providers or ethics committee members quickly grasp what the trial is about.
SPIRIT Item 2. Every protocol should have a protocol version identifier and date. This is usually on the cover page or footer. Why? Because protocols often get updated, you need a way to track changes.
That's right. You don't want different sites accidentally using different protocol versions. Along with versioning, the protocol should outline the process for protocol amendments. Basically, how you will communicate any important changes. And whenever you release a new version, SPIRIT asks that you include a short list of what changed and why, almost like patch notes, so everyone can quickly see what's different. We'll expand on this later when we get to Item 31.
It's important to list who is involved in the trial and what their roles are. SPIRIT Item 3A asks for the names, affiliations, and roles of the protocol contributors. This section clarifies accountability and credit. Pragmatic trials can involve large teams. You might have partners from healthcare systems, data experts for electronic health records, implementation specialists, and patient partners. So it's good to acknowledge contributions and make roles clear.
SPIRIT 3B and 3C cover information about the sponsor or funder. It should also state what role the sponsor or funder has in the trial design, conduct, analysis, and reporting. For example, if a trial is industry-funded, the protocol might note, the sponsor reviewed the protocol but will have no role in data analysis or publication decisions. Or conversely, if they do have input, that should be transparent. Also, where you might have government or nonprofit funding, it's still important to disclose this information.
Moving to Item 3D, it asks for the composition and roles of any trial committees or coordinating groups. Large pragmatic trials might have structures like a steering committee, a data management team, an indigenous-led research committee, an implementation committee, or perhaps an endpoint adjudication committee. The protocol should list those and describe their responsibilities. This gives the reader a clear picture of the governance of the trial.
Now to the new Open Science section of SPIRIT 2025. This reflects a big push for transparency and helps prevent the dreaded file drawer problem, where negative or null trial results are never published. First, Item 4, Trial Registration. Specify the registry, like clinicaltrials.gov or the World Health Organization portal. the registration number, and the date of registration. If you haven't registered yet at the time of writing the protocol, you should state which registry you intend to use. The idea is that all trials should be publicly registered by the time the protocol is submitted for ethics approval.
Next is item 5, which asks about the availability of the protocol and statistical analysis plan. Often, we make the protocol and SAP publicly available by posting it on the registry or publishing a protocol paper.
Item 6 is about the data sharing plan. The protocol should state if you will share de-identified data, and if so, what data and how. For example, we will share the de-identified individual-level dataset and data dictionary via a data repository upon publication, accessible to researchers under a data use agreement. Or maybe you'll only share aggregated data or only upon request. Whatever the plan, spell it out. This might be especially important for pragmatic trials that apply for a waiver or alteration of consent, because it signals to ethics boards that you have carefully considered how data will be handled responsibly after the main trial.
Item 7A, funding sources. The protocol should list all sources of funding and support. This includes grants, institutional support, or any provision of free materials, such as if a company is donating the study drug. Next is item 7B, which goes over conflicts of interest. The protocol should declare any significant financial or personal interests of the investigators or advisors. If the principal investigator owns stock in a company making the intervention, that needs to be stated. Or if a steering committee member has a consulting role with a related firm, include that.
Item 8. Dissemination policy. This section describes how trial results will be shared, including publication, regardless of outcome, reporting in registries, and providing summaries to participating sites. Also, ethics boards like to see how trialists will return results to the community and trial participants. This could mean once the trial data become available, the trialists work with partners and explain in plain language what was found, maybe using a translator if needed, or even creative formats like a video or a pamphlet in local languages. The idea is to make sure partners and trial participants have the opportunity to hear the research team and can ask questions.
Now we dive into the introduction of the protocol. Spirit item 9A is the scientific background and rationale. For a pragmatic trial, the rationale often emphasizes a real-world problem. Maybe a treatment works in ideal settings, but we don't know if it's effective in typical practice. Or maybe there's an evidence gap in a broad population that hasn't been studied.
In the background, it is also vital to explicitly state the reasons for choosing your comparator, which is item 9B. In pragmatic trials, the comparator is often usual care. Describe what usual care means in your context. Is it whatever treatment patients would normally receive from their providers? Does it vary by site? The protocol might note, usual care defined as physicians managing patients according to their standard practice without the study intervention. This may include medications X or Y as needed. If you're using an active comparator or placebo, explain why that choice was made, ethically and scientifically.
Next is item 10, specific objectives and hypotheses. Here, you clearly state the primary and secondary questions the trial is designed to answer. Some protocols phrase objectives as questions, some as hypotheses. For example, the hypothesis might say, for adults receiving usual care in routine healthcare settings, the intervention, compared with usual care alone, will reduce hospitalizations by 20% over 12 months.
Here's a relatively new thing to explicitly include. Item 11. Patient and public involvement in the trial. This means describing whether and how patients or members of the public contributed to the trial design and how they might be involved moving forward. If you're working with Indigenous partners, community members, or public partners, even if they're not patients but caregivers or advocates, make sure to mention them too. If patients were not involved in the study design, which can sometimes be the case, many protocols state this explicitly and often provide a brief explanation.
When outlining your trial design, which is covered in item 12 of the Spirit checklist, be sure to specify the type of design you're using. Also, mention the unit of randomization and the allocation ratio. Additionally, specify the trial framework or intent. For example, is it a superiority, a non-inferiority, or an equivalence trial? And justify why the chosen design and trial framework makes sense for your context. It's also important to be explicit about the trial's pragmatic intent and how it fits in routine care settings.
Next, items 13 and 14, where we describe the setting of the trial, the context, locations, and eligibility criteria that allow readers to gauge the trial's generalizability. The inclusion and exclusion criteria should be justified by their necessity, while factoring in how these might affect the trial's level of pragmatism. Broad criteria ensure the trial population is closer to the target population. However, sometimes it is not possible for all participants or sites within a health system to participate for logistical, patient safety, or consent-related concerns. The protocol should state this clearly. For example, out of 20 clinics in the network, 15 will be recruited based on predefined selection criteria or feasibility.
Now we get to the heart of what's being done. Item 15A is about describing the intervention and comparator. A common saying is, enough detail to allow replication. The protocol should thoroughly describe each trial arm. For the intervention, what exactly is it? If it's a drug, specify the name, dose, frequency, route, and any titration. If it's a non-drug, like a procedure, device, app, or care program, describe the components, who delivers it, how often, and where. For complex interventions, reference any manuals or training materials. All these details ensure someone else could replicate the program in their own setting.
In a pragmatic trial, one notable aspect might be to allow some flexibility in how the intervention is delivered, because that's how it might be done in routine care. But you still must define the core elements that cannot change to ensure everyone is roughly doing the same thing. For example, if the intervention is a 5-minute educational video shown to patients, the core might be the video content and that it is shown before discharge. The flexibility might be that one hospital shows it on a tablet, another on a TV screen, and a nurse or a volunteer can initiate it.
Next is describing the comparator with equal clarity. Even when the comparator is usual care, the protocol should articulate what usual care typically involves for the condition and how it might vary across sites. Where appropriate, document key aspects of usual care at each site to characterize its variability.
Spirit Item 15B asks you to pre-specify the conditions under which the assigned intervention could be modified or discontinued for a participant. That includes identifying when a change might be needed, who would make that decision, and what exactly would be modified, like dose, timing, or delivery method.
Even in pragmatic trials where flexibility is expected, you still need clear rules. Often, these decisions mirror routine care. For instance, if a patient experiences an adverse effect, a clinician might adjust the intervention just as they would in daily practice. What matters is how that change is documented. FRAME, short for the Framework for Reporting Adaptations and Modifications Enhanced, is one useful tool to guide this. It prompts you to capture when a change was made, whether it was planned, and why it happened.
Item 15C covers strategies to improve adherence to the intervention and how adherence will be monitored. In pragmatic trials, because you're operating in routine care settings with busy staff and patients, adherence can be a challenge. The protocol should specify how fidelity will be measured. This could include logs, electronic records, or self-reports. It should also mention any thresholds and actions, such as, if adherence at a site falls below X%, the coordinating team will offer refresher training or a site visit. PCORI, or the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, recommends matching monitoring to what would happen in usual care. If, in reality, an intervention would involve some quality checks, you incorporate similar checks into the trial, but you try not to go beyond that.
Now, item 15D, concomitant care that is permitted or prohibited. This refers to other treatments or interventions that participants might receive during the trial. In pragmatic trials, we often take a hands-off approach. Don't restrict what happens, just record it, because that mirrors reality. However, if there's something that would conflict with the intervention or raise potential patient safety concerns, You might list it as not allowed.
Next is pre-specifying outcome measures, item 16. The trial protocol needs to list all the outcomes being measured with a clear definition for each. Indicate which outcomes are primary versus secondary. Typically, one primary outcome is designated for the main hypothesis. Secondary outcomes might include various clinical or utilization measures and safety outcomes if relevant. For each outcome, specify what is being measured, how, and when. If using electronic health records or claims data, we need to specify the data sources and any algorithms to extract outcomes.
Clarity here prevents outcome switching or ambiguity later. For example, don't just say mortality. Specify all-cause mortality versus disease-specific mortality and the time horizon. One thing to note, if patient-reported outcomes are key in your trial, there's a Spirit patient-reported outcomes extension for how to handle those. But at minimum, in the protocol, you'd describe any plans to collect patient-reported outcomes and how you'll gather them.
Spirit item 17 is about harms. How will you assess and report adverse events? The protocol should define what qualifies as an adverse event in this study and what, if any, specific adverse outcomes you are watching for. It should say whether you're going to actively solicit or just collect those that happen to be reported. It's crucial to mention if you have any stopping rules for safety, and also if a data monitoring committee will be reviewing adverse events, though that might come in the monitoring section as well.
Safety is as important as effectiveness. In pragmatic trials, harm surveillance may leverage existing clinical monitoring or databases, but the protocol must specify this approach clearly.
Spirit item 18 focuses on the participant timeline, which is an extremely useful part of a protocol. This is usually presented as a table or schematic figure that lays out the full schedule of the trial, from screening and enrollment through randomization, intervention delivery, follow-up assessments, and study closeout. Spirit actually recommends including this visual summary, often called the Spirit figure. As in this template table, you'll typically see rows for key procedures like eligibility screening, informed consent, intervention delivery, and outcome assessments, and columns for each time point in the study. This makes it immediately clear what happens when and where data are being collected. If your trial includes a run-in period to establish baseline data, or a washout period, such as in a crossover design, those should be clearly marked in the timeline as well.
From a pragmatic perspective, it's also important to reflect how follow-up happens in the real world. If outcomes are captured through routinely collected data, note when those data pulls occur and whether there is any direct participant contact. And in cluster trials, remember that timelines may operate at two levels: a cluster-level rollout and an individual participant schedule.
All right, I think that's a good place to pause, and that brings us to the end of the first part on developing trial protocols guided by the Spirit checklist.
We covered foundational elements, everything from the title of the trial protocol all the way through to participant timelines. In the next module, we'll pick up with the remaining Spirit elements to keep building a strong, transparent, and pragmatic trial protocol. Don't forget, if you found this content useful, make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you do not miss future content.